The Mediterranean waters thrashed violently on November 8, 1942. Hundreds of Allied vessels cut through the churning waves. Operation Torch was beginning. America's inaugural major amphibious strike against Axis powers was underway. Dawn light crept across the North African shoreline. General Dwight Eisenhower stood frozen in disbelief. A subordinate had just delivered catastrophic news. The information left him speechless. His troops carried a mysterious weapon into battle. Not one soldier knew how to use it. The weapon stretched 5 feet of cold steel. Soon it would earn a peculiar nickname. The name came from a comedian's strange musical creation. This steel tube was the bazooka. Eisenhower himself would later call it crucial. He listed it among 4 essential tools. These tools delivered victory to the Allies in World War II. This weapon became Japan's worst nightmare in the Pacific. Enemy forces had never seen anything like it. Their shock was absolute and terrifying. This story reveals desperate innovation under pressure. It shows battlefield creativity at its finest. It tells how ordinary foot soldiers gained incredible power. They could suddenly destroy seemingly invincible tanks. Fortifications that seemed impregnable crumbled before them. The journey stretched from dusty Aberdeen workshops. It reached blood-soaked Saipan beaches. This remarkable path changed warfare forever. America's secret weapon transformed everything. The year 1941 brought disaster after disaster. Pearl Harbor lay twisted and burning. The Philippines had collapsed completely. Japanese forces swept across Pacific waters. They moved like an unstoppable natural disaster. Island after island fell to their advance. Their efficiency was absolutely terrifying to witness. German submarines stalked Atlantic shipping lanes. Allied vessels sank almost at will. The ocean floor became a graveyard. In North Africa, the situation was equally grim. Rommel's Africa Corps pushed hard. British forces retreated toward Egypt. The Axis powers controlled every advantage. For the first time since revolutionary days, the United States faced possible complete defeat. But scattered across America, something was happening. In laboratories and workshops, hope flickered. Scientists worked through endless nights. Engineers pushed past exhaustion. They developed weapons that could change everything. One weapon would prove absolutely revolutionary. It changed how infantry fought forever. Not just in World War II. For decades afterward, its influence spread. Yet its beginning was remarkably humble, almost accidental in its simplicity. The creative spark came from one mind. A young Army lieutenant colonel saw potential. Others looked at the same materials. They saw only worthless scrap metal. He saw the future of warfare. The tale starts in 1933 at Aberdeen. This Maryland proving ground buzzed with activity. American scientists had experimented for years. Rocket technology fascinated them since World War I ended. Dr. Robert Goddard earned a special title. People called him the father of American rocketry. During the First World War, he created something special. Small rocket-propelled projectiles showed incredible promise. But the conflict ended too soon. His innovations never saw actual combat. More than 20 years passed slowly. His groundbreaking work collected dust. Military archives held his research. The Army focused elsewhere entirely. Conventional artillery received attention. Small arms development continued. Then European war erupted. Everything changed in an instant. Reports arrived from distant battlefields. Poland, France, and North Africa told the same story. German tanks showed devastating effectiveness. The Wehrmacht's panzer divisions had revolutionized everything. They combined 3 deadly elements perfectly: Armor provided protection, speed allowed rapid movement, firepower delivered destruction. Traditional infantry weapons seemed pathetic against them. They could not counter this combination. American military observers watched with mounting terror. German tanks rolled through defensive lines. These lines had seemed absolutely impregnable. The armor deflected rifle fire easily. Even lighter artillery bounced off harmlessly. The problem was elegantly simple. It was also absolutely terrifying to consider. American foot soldiers had no reliable tank-stopping method. Anti-tank rifles existed but had problems. They were far too heavy for individual soldiers. Artillery could destroy tanks when properly positioned, but it required quick deployment. German blitzkrieg tactics prevented exactly that response. They disrupted coordinated defensive measures completely. Mines worked effectively under specific conditions. They needed advanced placement along known routes. The army desperately needed something different. A weapon that ordinary soldiers could carry. Something they could use against armored vehicles. It needed greater range than hand grenades. The solution emerged from an unlikely pairing. Old research met new desperation. Innovation was about to be born. In 1941, Colonel Leslie Skinner worked tirelessly. The U.S. Army's rocket development program consumed him. He improved Dr. Goddard's earlier designs constantly. Then he encountered Captain Edward Uhl. This young ordnance officer brought engineering knowledge. His background proved absolutely crucial. Uhl had experimented with shaped charge warheads extensively. These explosive devices focused their blast precisely. They created narrow, armor-piercing jets. Molten metal became a deadly projectile. The technology definitely existed, but delivery methods remained problematic. No practical way existed to get warheads to targets. The breakthrough arrived on a spring day. The year was 1942. Uhl later recalled the moment vividly. He walked past a scrap pile. Aberdeen Proving Ground accumulated such piles regularly. Something caught his trained eye. A discarded steel tube lay forgotten. It measured about 5 feet in length. The diameter was exactly 60 millimeters. This matched his shaped charge grenades perfectly. Inspiration struck like lightning. Uhl realized he held the answer. America's anti-tank problem had a solution. He would combine Skinner's rocket technology carefully. His shaped charge warhead would provide the punch. A simple launch tube would deliver everything. A soldier could carry it on his shoulder. The first prototype was incredibly crude, but it functioned exactly as intended. Uhl grabbed the salvage tube immediately. He attached a wooden rifle stock securely. Homemade grips completed the assembly. He had created the future, the most influential infantry weapon of modern times. Early test firings used the Potomac River. Despite rough appearance, the concept worked perfectly. A soldier could shoulder the launcher easily. Aiming at targets was straightforward. Firing rocket-propelled grenades produced devastating results. The weapon's nickname came from entertainment. Bob Burns was a popular radio comedian. The 1930s and 40s knew him well. He had invented a bizarre musical instrument. He called his creation a bazooka. 2 gas pipes formed the base. A tin funnel completed one end. Axle grease held everything together. The sounds defied all musical classification. Burns had served as a Marine. World War I had been his war. He entertained troops with his strange contraption. Someone at Aberdeen Proving Ground made a connection. They saw Uhl's launcher for the first time. It reminded them of Bob Burns' bazooka immediately. The name stuck permanently and completely. The official designation was lengthy. Launcher Rocket 2.36-inch anti-tank M1. but everyone called it the bazooka universally. The Army's response was decidedly mixed. Some officers showed genuine enthusiasm. They recognized its incredible potential. Infantry units could gain unprecedented firepower. Others remained deeply skeptical. They pointed out obvious problems. The weapon was completely untested in combat. Training troops would require precious time that America might not possess. The war situation continued deteriorating rapidly. The weapon's early reliability was questionable. The battery-operated firing system caused problems. It was especially temperamental in harsh conditions. The rockets themselves performed inconsistently. Some failed to ignite properly. Others exploded prematurely during flight. But 1942 progressed relentlessly forward. America prepared to enter ground combat. Military planners faced a difficult decision. The bazooka might be imperfect, but it was the only practical option available. American infantry needed anti-tank capability desperately. Production began with serious commitment. General Electric received the launcher contract. The EEG Budd Company would produce ammunition. By November 1942, the situation had changed. Thousands of bazookas rolled off production lines. They shipped to units preparing for combat. This brings us back to that shocking revelation. The eve of Operation Torch arrived. General Eisenhower commanded his first major operation. He discovered something absolutely devastating. His forces had received bazooka distribution, but none of his soldiers had proper training. No one knew how to operate them correctly. The implications were truly staggering to consider. American troops would face German armor soon. Italian tanks waited in North Africa. Their primary anti-tank weapon was useless. Nobody knew how to operate it properly. The oversight was not entirely surprising. America's war entry had been rushed. Chaotic logistics complicated everything. Hundreds of thousands of men needed movement. Tons of equipment crossed the Atlantic. The bazooka had been developed recently. Training programs did not exist yet. Field manuals were incomplete or missing entirely. Most weapons shipped directly from factories. Transport ships received them immediately. Little opportunity existed for familiarization training. The weapons traveled from assembly lines to ships. No stops occurred along the way. Eisenhower's reaction was swift and decisive. Proper training aboard ships was impossible. He ordered immediate crash courses anyway. Every available officer received the mission. Non-commissioned officers with weapon knowledge joined them. They would teach their men immediately. The night before landings arrived. Soldiers huddled in cramped spaces below decks. Flashlights provided the only illumination. They learned to load, aim, and fire. They might need this weapon within hours. The irony was absolutely striking. The bazooka represented American industrial excellence. Unlike massive, complex weapon systems, those required years to develop completely. The bazooka was elegantly simple in design. A steel tube formed the foundation. A shoulder rest provided stability. Basic sights allowed aiming. The trigger mechanism used standard power. Dry cell batteries powered everything. The same type appeared in civilian flashlights. The rocket ammunition was equally straightforward. A shaped charge warhead provided punch. A small rocket motor delivered propulsion. Stabilizing fins ensured accuracy during flight. This simplicity was both blessing and curse. It represented the weapon's greatest strength. It also created its most serious weakness. On the positive side, everything was clear. Bazookas could be mass-produced quickly. Manufacturing was cheap, using existing capacity. A soldier needed minimal training. The weapon operation was straightforward. The basic design was robust. It functioned in harsh battlefield conditions. From African deserts to Pacific jungles. Performance remained consistent across climates. But the weapon's simplicity also meant limitations. The 2.36-inch rocket had specific power. It could penetrate about 5 inches of steel. This was adequate against lighter German tanks, but insufficient against heavier Panzer models. Those were increasingly common on battlefields. The effective range was only 100 yards. Most combat situations required closer engagement. This forced bazooka crews dangerously close. They had to approach their targets. The weapon produced distinctive signatures. A backblast occurred with each firing. Smoke trails revealed the shooter's position immediately. Enemy forces could spot them instantly. Perhaps most critically, the weapon required teamwork. 2 men were needed for effective operation. A gunner aimed and fired the weapon. A loader carried ammunition constantly. He reloaded between shots as well. This made bazooka teams particularly vulnerable. Losing either man rendered the weapon useless. The team could not function properly. The loading process itself was cumbersome. It was also extremely time-consuming. Each rocket required careful insertion. It went through the rear of the tube. An electrical firing wire needed connection. This process took precious seconds. The first combat tests arrived with Operation Torch. The results were mixed at best. The weapon proved effective against targets. Lighter French tanks in Morocco fell. Algerian armor was also vulnerable, but the lack of training showed clearly. Many crews fumbled with loading procedures. Enemy fire made them nervous. Others failed to account for backblast. Friendly forces positioned too close suffered injuries. Some rockets failed to detonate properly. Others exploded prematurely in tubes. Operators were killed or wounded. Despite these initial problems, potential was obvious. Anyone witnessing proper employment could see it. The weapon could disable armored vehicles. It could destroy targets previously invulnerable. More importantly, it gave soldiers psychological advantage. They had a weapon against enemy armor. No longer would infantry units rely solely on mines. Artillery support was not always available. Suicidal close-range attacks with satchel charges were unnecessary. For the first time in modern warfare, something changed. A single soldier could engage tanks. He could defeat them in direct combat. The Germans recognized the bazooka's significance quickly. They captured examples from Soviet forces. Lend-Lease had provided weapons to Russia. American units in North Africa also lost examples. German engineers immediately began reverse engineering. They studied the design carefully. Ultimately, they produced their own version. They called it the Panzerschreck. The German rocket launcher was larger. It was also more powerful than its predecessor. It fired an 80 mm rocket. The bazooka's projectile was only 60 mm. This gave the Panzerschreck superior armor penetration, but it came at a cost. Increased weight made it harder to carry. Complexity made it more difficult to maintain. The fact that Germans copied the design was testimony. Here was a weapon so fundamentally important. One of the world's most advanced military powers acted quickly. They produced their own version immediately, rather than attempting to develop countermeasures. The concept of man-portable anti-tank rockets spread. It influenced weapon design for generations. But while the bazooka proved its worth in Mediterranean theater, something else was happening. Military planners looked ahead to the next phase. The campaign against Japan in the Pacific approached. Japanese armor was generally lighter than German tanks. This suggested the bazooka might be even more effective. However, the Pacific theater presented unique challenges. The weapon would be tested in ways designers never anticipated. The climate of Pacific Islands was brutal. Mechanical equipment suffered constantly. High humidity created problems. Salt air caused corrosion. Tropical temperatures affected everything. The bazooka's electrical firing system was vulnerable. Batteries corroded rapidly in humid conditions. They often failed at critical moments. Moisture infiltration caused rocket misfires. Some failed to ignite completely. The extreme heat sometimes caused problems. Propellant charges burned too quickly. This reduced the rocket's range significantly. Accuracy also suffered under these conditions. More fundamentally, Pacific fighting was different. American forces had not experienced this before. North Africa and Europe were different theaters. Japanese defensive tactics relied on specific approaches. Fortified positions were their strength. Concrete bunkers dotted the landscape. Cave complexes were carefully prepared. Camouflaged pillboxes waited everywhere. These installations could withstand tremendous punishment. Conventional weapons barely scratched them. These installations were often too well protected. The bazooka's shaped charge warhead had limitations. It was designed primarily for tank armor. Tank armor was relatively thin material. These fortifications were much more substantial. Japanese forces also employed different tactics. Their approach differed from German counterparts. Rather than relying on mass tank attacks, Japanese commanders preferred small groups. Individual vehicles provided infantry support. This made armor versus armor engagements rare. The Pacific theater saw few such battles. But when American troops encountered Japanese tanks, something happened. The engagements occurred at close range. Heavily vegetated terrain was common. The bazooka's limitations became apparent. The weapon's distinctive backblast was problematic. The smoke signature had proved troublesome before. Open terrain of North Africa had shown this. It became even more dangerous now. Pacific Island fighting occurred in confined spaces. The blast could ignite vegetation easily. This revealed American positions to Japanese observers. In cave complexes, the problem was worse. Bunker systems reflected the backblast. It bounced back toward the operator. Severe burns or injuries resulted. Despite these challenges, American military leaders understood reality. The Pacific Campaign required every possible advantage. Japanese forces had shown fanatical determination. They were willing to fight to death. Surrender was not in their vocabulary. Their defensive positions were incredibly formidable. They were among the most impressive ever constructed. They took full advantage of natural terrain. Killing fields could decimate attacking forces completely. The bazooka might not be perfect. Pacific conditions were challenging, but it was the only portable weapon available. It could give infantry units a fighting chance. Japanese fortifications and armor could be engaged. As 1943 progressed, American forces prepared. Their island-hopping campaign across the Central Pacific began. The bazooka underwent continuous refinement during this time. The M1A1 version incorporated improvements. Better sights were added. Protection against backblast was improved. The electrical firing system was redesigned. It became more resistant to moisture. Humidity was a constant problem. New types of ammunition were developed. They were created specifically for Pacific conditions. White phosphorus rounds were produced. These could be used against personnel. Structures could also be targeted. Not just armor anymore. Perhaps more importantly, the Army established programs. Comprehensive training for bazooka crews began. The rushed deployment of Operation Torch was gone. Systematic instruction replaced chaos. Soldiers understood more than just operation. They learned when and where to use it. Maximum effectiveness required proper employment. Tactical doctrine evolved to account for reality. The weapon had strengths and limitations. Bazooka teams integrated into larger operations. Combined arms operations were more effective. They did not operate independently anymore. The stage was now set completely. The bazooka's true test in Pacific theater approached. American forces prepared for brutal fighting. It would be among the most savage in military history. They would assault heavily fortified Japanese positions. These islands were thousands of miles from home. The men carrying steel tubes into battle had no knowledge. They could not know what awaited them. They were about to encounter an enemy unlike anything before. Their revolutionary weapon would prove surprising. It would be both more and less effective. No one had imagined this reality. As the first American invasion fleets prepared, something was happening. They would sail toward the Marshall Islands. Early 1944 brought intelligence reports. These suggested Japanese forces were developing tactics. New defensive approaches were being created. They were specifically designed to counter American advantages. What those reports could not predict was profound impact. The bazooka would affect tactical situations, but also psychological impact on Japanese forces. They had never encountered such a weapon. The Japanese military had built defensive strategy. It was based on specific assumptions. American infantry was well equipped, they knew. Rifles and light machine guns were standard, but they lacked portable firepower necessary. They could not reduce fortified positions easily. Massive artillery support was required. Close air support was also necessary. Japanese bunkers and pillboxes were designed carefully. They could withstand conventional small arms fire. Even direct hits from light mortars were survivable. The sudden appearance of American soldiers changed everything. They carried weapons that could deliver destruction. High-explosive warheads had rifle accuracy. This would fundamentally alter tactical balance. The Pacific would never be the same. But the weapon's impact extended far beyond tactics. The bazooka represented something entirely new. It was the democratization of destructive power. For centuries, certain abilities had been exclusive. Destroying fortifications required specialized units. Armored vehicles needed heavy weapons. Suddenly, any infantry squad could carry equivalent firepower. It was like having a light artillery piece, deployable instantly with devastating effect. This shift had profound implications, not just for World War II alone. The entire future of military conflict would change. The transformation was already beginning. Training camps across the United States buzzed. Thousands of young Americans learned to wield this weapon. Soon, they would carry it into battle, against an enemy who had never seen it. The shock of that first encounter would reverberate through Japanese military hierarchy all the way. Tokyo itself would feel the impact. Those Japanese commanders had no idea. General Eisenhower's secret weapon was coming. It was about to change everything. Everything they thought they understood. Modern warfare would never be the same. The morning of June 15, 1944 arrived. Clear skies stretched over Saipan Island. Japanese forces waited in concrete bunkers. Cave complexes dotted the mountainous terrain. They prepared for what they believed would happen. Another costly but successful defense. American amphibious assault was expected. They had studied American tactics carefully. Previous campaigns had taught them lessons. They knew about massive preliminary bombardments. Coordinated attacks by infantry were standard. Tank and artillery support was predictable. They thought they knew what to expect. They were catastrophically wrong about everything. As the first waves surged forward, something was different. Marines from the 2nd and 4th Divisions stormed ashore. They carried a weapon that would change everything. The tactical balance in the Pacific would shift. They brought the future with them. That steel tube would rewrite the rules. Modern warfare was about to be transformed forever. The refined M9 bazooka had undergone complete transformation through brutal combat experience across North Africa and Italy. Now it prepared to enter the Pacific theater. What unfolded next would create seismic tremors throughout Japan's military command structure. General Eisenhower's faith in his secret weapon was about to receive ultimate validation. Transformation had started months before in American training facilities. Marine and Army units destined for Pacific combat finally received thorough instruction. The rushed, inadequate preparation that plagued Operation Torch was history. Every bazooka team now understood the weapon completely. They knew how to integrate it into amphibious assault choreography. They mastered jungle warfare applications. Mediterranean lessons had proven invaluable. Veterans returning from Sicily and Italy carried hard-won knowledge. They brought tactical wisdom about the weapon's employment. They had learned the bazooka exceeded its original design parameters. While created primarily for anti-tank work, it devastated bunkers with shocking effectiveness. Pillboxes crumbled under its assault. Machine gun nests vanished in explosive fury. Fortified positions that seemed impregnable became vulnerable targets. The shaped charge warhead designed to pierce tank armor also blasted through concrete barriers. It shattered steel reinforcements. It created gaps in defensive lines that conventional weapons could never breach. These gaps transformed battlefield dynamics completely. Marine Sergeant John Torres had survived Guadalcanal's horrors. He trained extensively with the new weapon system. His first impression left lasting impact. When instructors demonstrated what the bazooka could do to concrete bunkers, everyone knew Japanese forces faced unprecedented surprise. American troops had fought 2 years with rifles and grenades. They had to approach enemy positions close enough to touch them. Suddenly, they could stand back 50 yards. They could punch through anything Japanese engineers might construct. The psychological transformation of American forces matched the tactical advantages. For the first time in Pacific warfare, ordinary infantry possessed weapons capable of engaging seemingly impregnable Japanese fortifications. These positions had claimed countless American lives. The confidence this capability instilled in assault troops cannot be measured. No longer did attacking Japanese bunkers require suicidal charges with satchel explosives. No longer did flamethrower teams have to advance within touching distance. 2-man bazooka teams could engage enemy positions from relatively safe distances. They could neutralize threats without accepting massive casualties. The tactical revolution was complete. Perhaps more significant was the weapon's effect on Japanese defensive planning. Japanese military doctrine in the Pacific had evolved around specific assumptions. They believed American infantry, while numerous and well-equipped, lacked portable weapons capable of reducing fortified positions. This assumption shaped every defensive strategy. Japanese engineers designed their defensive works to withstand direct hits from light mortars. They calculated resistance against artillery bombardment. They felt confident that American foot soldiers would be forced into close-range assaults. In such encounters, Japanese advantages in terrain and preparation would prove decisive. These calculations seemed sound. They appeared militarily logical. The bazooka shattered every assumption completely. It rendered years of defensive planning obsolete overnight. When American forces launched their Saipan assault, Japanese defenders encountered a weapon they had never seen. They possessed no countermeasures. They had no tactical response. The psychological shock was devastating. Japanese soldiers had been trained to believe their concrete bunkers provided virtual invincibility. They watched in horror as American infantrymen casually destroyed these positions. The destruction came from distances previously considered safe. Lieutenant Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto served as a Japanese artillery officer. He was captured during Saipan's later stages. His post-war interrogations provided insight into enemy perspectives. His testimony revealed complete bewilderment. Japanese intelligence had briefed them about American tanks and artillery. No one had warned about infantry soldiers carrying what appeared to be simple tubes. These tubes could destroy their strongest positions instantly. The effect on morale was catastrophic. The first major test came on June 16th. Japanese forces launched a massive tank-supported counterattack against 2nd Marine Division positions. Japanese commanders had committed their armor reserves in desperate gambit. They sought to drive Marines back into the sea before secure footholds could be established. This was exactly the engagement the bazooka was designed for. Combat conditions were far more challenging than any training exercise. The attack began in pre-dawn darkness. Approximately 28 Japanese tanks advanced through a narrow valley toward Marine positions. Laid tanks were Type 97 Chiha medium tanks. They mounted 47mm guns. Their armor protection was considered adequate by Japanese standards. Compared to German or American designs, this armor was actually quite thin. Lighter tankettes followed behind the mediums. Infantry provided close support for the armored spearhead. Marine bazooka teams positioned in carefully prepared fighting holes along the expected advance route. They waited until Japanese armor reached effective range. Patience was critical. Timing would determine success or failure. The first rocket fired in combat anger struck the lead tank directly. It hit the front slope armor. Penetration was complete. The warhead detonated inside the crew compartment. The tank erupted in flames immediately. It blocked the narrow valley path completely. Following vehicles were forced to maneuver around the burning wreck. This created tactical opportunities for waiting Marines. What happened next demonstrated both the bazooka's effectiveness and tactical evolution since North Africa. Marine bazooka teams worked in coordination with machine gun crews. Rifle squads created overlapping fields of fire. This was combined arms warfare at its finest. Japanese tanks attempted to bypass the burning lead vehicle. They found themselves caught in deadly crossfire from multiple directions. Each movement exposed them to new threats. Each maneuver brought them within range of additional bazooka teams. Corporal Robert Sherrard was a war correspondent witnessing the battle. His later account captured the surreal nature of the engagement. Japanese crews would halt their tanks. They would jump out and sing songs while waving swords. Finally, someone would blow a bugle signal. They would jump back into their tanks. Then Marines would destroy them with bazooka fire. It resembled nothing Sherrard had ever seen in combat. The destruction was methodical. It appeared almost casual. Enemy armor that should have been their most powerful weapons became burning scrap metal. The technical superiority of the bazooka over Japanese armor was overwhelming. The M6A3 rocket used by Pacific Marine Forces carried 8 ounces of Composition B explosive. This explosive was housed in a shaped charge warhead. The warhead could penetrate 5 inches of steel armor. Japanese tank armor rarely exceeded 1.5 inches in thickness. This meant bazooka hits were almost invariably fatal to target vehicles. More importantly, the weapon's accuracy at combat ranges meant skilled crews achieved first-round hits consistently. There was no need for ranging shots. No need for multiple attempts. One rocket equaled 1 dead tank in most engagements. But the bazooka's impact extended far beyond simple armor penetration statistics. The weapon fundamentally altered tactical relationships between infantry and armor in Pacific warfare. Japanese commanders had relied on their tanks to provide close support for infantry attacks. Tanks served as mobile strongpoints in defensive operations. This tactical doctrine was now obsolete. The sudden vulnerability of armored vehicles to ordinary foot soldiers armed with bazookas forced complete reconsideration of Japanese armor employment. Tank crews already operated vehicles inferior to their American counterparts. Now they faced additional stress, knowing any enemy infantryman might carry a weapon capable of instant tank destruction. This knowledge affected crew performance dramatically. Many Japanese tankers became hesitant to advance into areas where American infantry might be present. Hesitation in armored warfare equals death. Aggressive action was essential for tank survival. When crews lost confidence, they lost effectiveness. The Saipan success was repeated throughout the Central Pacific Campaign. American forces island-hopped toward Japan's home islands. On Guam, Tinian, and the Marshall Islands, bazooka teams consistently demonstrated their ability to neutralize Japanese defensive positions. Positions that had been considered impregnable became vulnerable targets. The weapon proved particularly effective against elaborate cave complexes. Japanese engineers had carved these fortifications into coral and volcanic rock of Pacific islands. These cave systems represented some of World War II's most sophisticated defensive engineering. Japanese positions were often carved dozens of feet into solid rock. Multiple chambers connected through tunnel networks. Elaborate ventilation systems provided fresh air circulation. Ammunition storage areas were blast-protected and climate-controlled. The entrances were carefully camouflaged. They provided interlocking fields of fire while remaining virtually invisible to attacking forces. Against such positions, conventional weapons were often ineffective. Artillery and naval gunfire could crater surrounding areas. They rarely penetrated cave systems themselves. Concussion from near misses might temporarily stun defenders, but permanent damage was minimal. Flamethrower teams could clear immediate entrance areas. They could not reach deeper chambers where Japanese defenders would retreat and regroup. The fuel supply was limited. Range was restricted. Operators were extremely vulnerable to enemy fire. Direct assault with infantry was costly and time-consuming. It often required multiple attacks over several days to clear a single complex. Casualties mounted with each attempt. Progress was measured in yards rather than miles. The bazooka changed this tactical equation dramatically. A well-placed rocket could collapse cave entrances completely. It could seal tunnel systems permanently. It could detonate ammunition stored within the complexes. Secondary explosions often caused more damage than the original rocket impact. More importantly, the weapon's accuracy allowed American forces to engage specific firing ports. They could target observation positions that had previously been too small for effective attack. Precision engagement replaced area bombardment. Surgical strikes replaced massive assaults. Marine Private First Class David Chen served with a bazooka team during the Tinian campaign. He recalled the tactical evolution clearly. Teams learned they didn't always need to destroy entire cave systems. Sometimes sealing the entrance was sufficient. Other times, firing several rounds into openings would collapse front chambers. Follow-up with grenades or flamethrowers finished the job. It was surgical compared to previous methods. The Japanese response to the bazooka threat was swift but largely ineffective. Japanese intelligence officers worked frantically to obtain captured examples. They needed specimens for analysis and reverse engineering. Understanding the weapon's principles was crucial for developing countermeasures. By late 1944, Japanese forces had developed their own rocket-propelled anti-tank weapon. The Type 4 70mm launcher showed clear American influence. However, this weapon reached Japanese units too late and in too small quantities to affect the Pacific Campaign's outcome. More significantly, The Japanese military establishment struggled to develop effective countermeasures against the bazooka threat. Their armor production shifted toward vehicles with thicker armor. This came at the cost of mobility and mechanical reliability. These were precious commodities for forces operating on isolated islands with limited maintenance facilities. Defensive positions were redesigned with deeper overhead cover. More complex entrance systems were incorporated. But these modifications required resources and time that Japanese forces increasingly lacked. Material shortages limited construction options. Labor shortages slowed completion schedules. The bazooka's success in the Pacific also accelerated its evolution and improvement. Combat experience revealed areas where the weapon could be enhanced. This led to development of new ammunition types specifically designed for Pacific conditions. Launcher modifications optimized performance in tropical environments. White phosphorus rounds proved particularly effective against Japanese positions. They created smoke screens while simultaneously causing devastating fires. The dry vegetation common on many Pacific islands was extremely susceptible to incendiary effects. Entire defensive complexes could be consumed by fires started with single white phosphorus rounds. Incendiary rounds were developed for use against Japanese aircraft and fuel storage areas. These specialized warheads could ignite aviation gasoline and other volatile materials from considerable distances. They eliminated the need for direct assault on heavily defended airfields. High explosive rounds with delayed fuses could penetrate bunker walls and explode inside protected spaces. This maximized damage to personnel and equipment while minimizing exposure for bazooka teams. The delayed detonation allowed warheads to fully penetrate before exploding. The variety of ammunition available gave bazooka teams tremendous tactical flexibility. They could adapt their firepower to specific target types and battlefield conditions. This adaptability was crucial in Pacific fighting, where targets varied enormously between islands. The weapon's impact on Japanese civilian morale was also significant, though often overlooked in military histories. As news of American advances reached Japanese home islands, stories of the devastating new weapon began circulating. The bazooka became a symbol of American technological superiority and industrial capability. These stories reinforced growing realization among Japanese civilians that their military was fighting an increasingly hopeless war. The contrast between propaganda claims of eventual victory and reports of continuous retreat became impossible to ignore. Civilian confidence in military leadership eroded steadily. Japanese propaganda attempts to counter this psychological impact were largely unsuccessful. Official announcements described American terror weapons or cowardly long-range devices. These descriptions could not disguise the fact that Japanese defensive positions thought to be impregnable were being systematically destroyed. Ordinary American soldiers were accomplishing what had seemed impossible. The contrast between Japanese propaganda claims of inevitable victory and reality of continuous retreat became undeniable. Citizens began questioning official statements about the war's progress. Trust in government pronouncements declined significantly. By early 1945, American forces prepared for the climactic battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The bazooka had become integral to American combined arms tactics in the Pacific. No longer was it simply an anti-tank weapon pressed into service against fortifications. It was now a specialized bunker-busting system optimized for island warfare's unique challenges. The Battle of Iwo Jima provided the ultimate test of both the weapon and tactical doctrines that had evolved around it. Japanese forces on Iwo Jima had constructed the most elaborate defensive system ever created. Over 11 miles of tunnels connected more than 1,500 bunkers and defensive positions. The entire island was a fortress designed to exact maximum casualties from attacking American forces. Marine bazooka teams landing on Iwo Jima's black volcanic beaches faced their most challenging assignment yet. Japanese positions were deeply buried in volcanic rock. They connected through tunnel systems that allowed defenders to reoccupy positions even after clearing. Traditional tactics of sealing cave entrances proved less effective when defenders could use alternate routes to re-establish their positions. But lessons learned in 2 years of Pacific fighting paid dividends. Marine units had developed sophisticated techniques for using bazookas in coordination with flamethrowers, demolition charges, and close air support. Rather than relying on single-weapon systems, American forces created integrated teams. These teams engaged Japanese positions with multiple attack methods simultaneously. The psychological impact on Japanese defenders was profound. Prisoners captured during later stages of the Iwo Jima battle reported that constant threat of bazooka attack had made movement between positions extremely dangerous. Japanese communications described American infantry as carrying individual artillery pieces. These weapons could destroy any position they could see. The accuracy and devastating power of the bazooka had created siege mentality among Japanese defenders. Even within their most heavily fortified positions, they felt vulnerable. The weapon's range meant nowhere was truly safe from American infantry. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi commanded Japanese forces on Iwo Jima. His final dispatches to Tokyo noted that American infantry weapons had evolved far beyond what Japanese defensive planning had anticipated. His reports described American soldiers who could destroy concrete bunkers with weapons small enough to be carried by hand. He noted that traditional Japanese defensive tactics were proving inadequate against this new threat. These dispatches revealed the fundamental shift that had occurred in Pacific warfare. Japanese defenders, who had initially held significant advantages, now found themselves facing American infantry units with unprecedented destructive capability. The tactical balance had shifted decisively in America's favor. The success of the bazooka in the Pacific theater validated General Eisenhower's assessment of the weapon as one of 4 tools that won World War II for the Allies. Statistics from Pacific campaigns showed bazookas accounted for destruction of hundreds of Japanese armored vehicles. Thousands of bunkers and defensive positions were eliminated. Countless artillery pieces and other equipment were destroyed. But, perhaps more importantly, the weapon had fundamentally altered the psychological balance of Pacific warfare. Japanese forces, which had initially held significant advantages in terrain, preparation, and defensive positioning, found themselves facing unprecedented American destructive capability. Every rifle company now possessed the ability to engage and destroy targets that previously required specialized heavy weapons units. The bazooka had democratized destructive power completely. This democratization changed everything about infantry warfare. Small unit tactics evolved around the weapon's capabilities. Training programs incorporated bazooka employment as standard procedure. The ripple effects extended throughout the Japanese military hierarchy. Staff officers who had planned defensive operations around assumptions of American tactical limitations were forced to completely reconsider their strategies. Years of planning became obsolete overnight. Engineering units that had designed fortifications to withstand conventional infantry weapons found their works vulnerable to a weapon they had never anticipated. Months of construction effort could be negated by a single well-placed rocket. The psychological impact was devastating. Training programs that had prepared Japanese soldiers for close-range combat against American riflemen proved inadequate. Those same Americans could now engage from distances of 50 to 100 yards with devastating effect. All previous tactical assumptions required revision. As the war entered its final phase with the invasion of Okinawa, the bazooka had become so integral to American Pacific operations that conducting amphibious assaults without it was unimaginable. The weapon had evolved from Eisenhower's untested secret weapon in North Africa to the backbone of American infantry firepower in the Pacific. This evolution represented more than simple weapon development. It embodied the American approach to warfare itself. Problems were identified, solutions were developed, and improvements were continuously implemented. Adaptability was the key to success. The final validation of the bazooka's revolutionary impact came from an unexpected source. The Japanese military itself provided this validation. In post-war interviews, former Japanese officers consistently cited American infantry's portable anti-tank and bunker-busting capabilities as one of the most significant factors in their defeat. These officers had experienced the weapon's effects firsthand. They understood its tactical implications better than any theoretical analysis could convey. Their testimony carried weight that no statistical study could match. The weapon that had begun as desperate improvisation by American engineers had become the symbol of American technological and tactical supremacy. From scrap pile inspiration to battlefield dominance, the bazooka's journey represented American ingenuity at its finest. But the bazooka's influence extended far beyond World War II. The concept of man-portable, rocket-propelled weapon systems would reshape military thinking for decades to come. Every major military power began developing similar weapons. They recognized that the balance between armor and infantry had fundamentally shifted. The democratization of destructive power that the bazooka represented would influence everything from Cold War military doctrine to modern counterinsurgency operations. Individual soldiers gained unprecedented ability to engage heavily armored or fortified targets. This capability transformed small unit tactics permanently. The weapon that General Eisenhower had called one of his 4 tools of victory had indeed changed warfare's face forever. From Aberdeen Proving Ground scrap pile to Saipan's beaches, the bazooka's journey represented more than successful weapon development. It embodied the American approach to warfare itself. Practical, adaptable, and overwhelmingly effective when properly applied. The shock that Japanese forces experienced when first encountering the bazooka was more than tactical surprise. It was recognition that their enemy possessed not just superior numbers and industrial capacity, but the ability to continuously innovate and adapt. The simple steel tube that American soldiers carried into battle represented a fundamental shift in modern warfare's nature. This shift would echo through military history long after World War II's last shot was fired. Innovation had triumphed over tradition. Adaptability had defeated rigid doctrine. American ingenuity had provided the tools necessary for victory. Today, more than 75 years after those first desperate tests along the Potomac River, descendants of Edward Oole's improvised launcher continue serving in armies worldwide. From the RPG-7 to modern anti-tank guided missiles, the basic concept remains unchanged. Individual soldiers retain the power to engage and destroy heavily armored or fortified targets. The legacy of Eisenhower's secret weapon lives on. It stands as testament to American ingenuity, battlefield innovation, and the profound impact that single revolutionary ideas can have on history's course. The weapon proved that sometimes the most significant advances come not from massive research programs or elaborate technological systems. They come from a young officer's moment of inspiration at a scrap pile. They come from determination to turn that inspiration into battlefield reality. They come when America's future hangs in the balance and innovation provides the solution. The Japanese troops who first encountered the bazooka on Pacific battlefields could never have imagined they were witnessing the birth of a new warfare era. They saw only the immediate tactical threat. They could not comprehend the broader implications of what they faced. In that new era, the simple tube carried by an ordinary American soldier would prove more significant than massive fortifications and elaborate defensive systems. Individual initiative would triumph over collective preparation. Technological innovation would overcome traditional military doctrine. In the end, the bazooka's greatest victory was not any single battle or campaign. It was the complete transformation of how modern militaries approach the relationship between offense and defense, between individual soldiers and the systems they carry into combat. The weapon that began as solution to one specific problem became foundation for an entirely new category of military technology. That technology continues to evolve and adapt to this day. The principles remain constant even as the applications multiply. The steel tube, the shaped charge warhead, the simple shoulder-fired design. These innovations combine to create something greater than the sum of their parts. They created a weapon that would change warfare forever. They proved that revolutionary advances often come from the simplest inspirations applied with determination and skill on battlefields where the future hangs in the balance.